Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Magical Megan. I'm your host Megan and today we're going to be talking about the final trailer for Crimes of Grindelwald. More specifically, a certain plot point name drop in the Crimes of Grindelwald trailer. Now, before I start rambling and getting weird, here is a big reminder, a big warning that this podcast is going to have some spoilers on it. It's got a pretty major spoiler in it, so if you don't want to be spoiled, now is the time to say nah and exit out. So, the new trailer for Crimes of Grindelwald, the final trailer, dropped on Tuesday afternoon, and I'm still in shock and reeling from it personally. I'm pretty sure so many of us are. But there is one particular thing that seems to be a big talking point in the fandom at the moment, and that is the name drop of none other than Nagini. So, as it turns out, Nagini is the name of the, so far, until now, unnamed Maledictus, played by Claudia Kim. Nagini is also the name of Voldemort's snake in the Harry Potter series. So this is a huge shock that Nagini used to be a human woman. It's just, I know people have been theorizing about this since the teaser trailer dropped, I'm sure. Since probably the first image was released a year ago now, nearly. I personally, I didn't put much stock in it at first, but I've been proven wrong. Obviously, I've been proven wrong. So this is really interesting for me because I'm actually going through rereading the Harry Potter books at the moment. I'm on Order of the Phoenix, and reading about it, it's like Nagini just is this evil snake, but in Fantastic Beasts, she's this really beautiful, sort of vulnerable woman. So you have to wonder, the character development she's going to go through to become Nagini the Snake. And, I've got a few theories, but, getting into that later. Now, personally, I'm really, really excited, actually, to see Nagini in Fantastic Beasts, because not only does it offer another connection to the Harry Potter series and to the Wizarding World, but I think it's just going to be a really interesting story. So, with Nagini, we've got this young woman who's, she's an Asian young woman. She's she's working in a circus, and we know she's living with this blood curse. That means that she's, destined to permanently transform into an animal for the rest of her life at some point. So, in interviews that have come out recently and hearing Claudia Kim talk about the character, it's, it seems that Nagini in Fantastic Beasts is this half snake, half human woman, and she's trying to cling on to that humanity for as long as she can. And I think that's just really poignant, personally. She knows she's going to turn into a snake. She knows that, her power, because she can do it at will at the moment, is being exploited by the circus. But she knows that she's going to turn into a snake permanently one day. And I can only imagine the kind of terror that would put you into know you're cursed to transform into a snake for the rest of your life. Even before the name drop, even before all this new information, we knew that the Maledictus / Nagini was quite vulnerable. Just judging by the way she seems to be around Credence in, the images we've seen and in the trailer, she seems to be very close to Credence, and it wouldn't surprise me if they've sort of formed some kind of friendship because they both have that same kind of fear and self-loathing, which, I'm literally pulling out theories at the moment, but that's what it seems like to me. It just seems like the Maledictus is a very vulnerable young woman. But we also now know, because we know she's Nagini, we have this insight from the Harry Potter books into what her future is. We know that she's going to become a snake because she's Voldemort's snake. She becomes Voldemort's Horcrux. And she doesn't seem to actually, from what I can tell from the Harry Potter books, she doesn't seem to actually have a problem working for Voldemort, which I find very interesting. Given the circumstances, I find it's very interesting that this vulnerable young woman later becomes this snake that is on the dark side, I find that very interesting. We also know that Nagini is later killed by Neville Longbottom because he beheads her with the Sword of Gryffindor. So, we do know Nagini now. We know she's going to survive the Fantastic Beasts series, even if we do know she's going to die in the Harry Potter series. It's the same with Dumbledore and Grindelwald. We know they're going to survive the Fantastic Beasts series, but we know they're going to die in the Harry Potter one as well. So I find that really interesting and intriguing for me personally, just knowing where Nagini is going to end up. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how she becomes Nagini, Voldemort's snake. And I'm not saying we're going to see that in this film, in the films, because from what I know, the Fantastic Beasts series is going to end, with the duel of Dumbledore and Grindelwald, sort of like in 1945. And so, we're probably not going to see her meet Voldemort unless J.K. Rowling does a little thing at the end of the 5th film. So I think it's going to be really interesting though to see where she ends up by the end of Fantastic Beasts. Will she have permanently become a snake by the end of Fantastic Beasts, the series, or will she be somewhere in Albania? It's just so many possibilities, so many. I'm actually really excited to see Nagini. I know some people are worried that J.K. Rowling's just pulling this out of her ass, and sometimes I've had that fear as well. And while I'm not quite sure I believe she's been sitting on this for 20 years, I'm not going to question it. It's a fantasy series. She can write whatever the fuck she wants. It's her series. I personally am really excited because I think it could be a really interesting story. I think Nagini is going to be a character that we're all going to kind of grow to love. She's going to be complex and damaged and vulnerable and just really wonderful to see on screen. And, just from the trailer, I'm already intrigued. I want to see more of her. I already love her because I've seen Claudia Kim's reaction to finally being able to say that she's Nagini. I just feel so happy for her. And I already feel like I love Nagini, even though we've only seen brief glimpses of her. There has been some backlash from fans, I know, about this whole Nagini thing, and one thing I've seen is people have been describing this whole Nagini thing as being a bit perverted, now knowing that she was a woman. I've seen people making references to, in the Goblet of Fire book, milking, Wormtail, you need to milk Nagini, and I just want to say that they were not, snakes do not have boobs. I can't believe I'm saying this on a podcast, but guys, please don't panic. Snakes do not have breasts. When he said you need to milk Nagini, he meant you need to milk the venom from her fangs, because they were using her venom in a potion to keep Voldemort's spirit thing alive. So, it was nothing gross or too gross, I promise. It wasn't like he was suckling from her like a puppy suckles from their mother. It was literally just, Wormtail, you need to milk the venom from her fangs, which happens to all snakes, I'm assuming. I'm not a snake expert. But, it's nothing as gross as, as I've seen people describe it, it's nothing like Voldemort sucking on someone's snake titties. I can't believe I just said that on a live stream, but on a podcast, but there you go. Another thing I've seen being complained about is the fact that she's an Asian woman, and that, they think this is a reference, an Asian woman being subservient to a white supremacist male. And, I'm not trying to, put people's opinions down because, it's your opinion, you're entitled to it, but I can't wrap my head around it because Voldemort isn't a white supremacist. He's never made any mention about about whites being superior to other people. He's never made that kind of comment. The only supremacy he has is family lineage, the blood background of wizards, and that's because of his own background, I'm assuming, knowing that he had a muggle father and his mother was a witch, and just like that. So I personally don't think Voldemort is Hitler, if that makes sense. There are some comparisons you could draw. I've always drawn the comparison to Voldemort and Hitler. Not quite extreme comparison, but sort of saying roughly the same kind of idea of, stamping out a certain bloodline or a certain type of blood status, as it were. I'm describing this poorly. I'm just going off on a tangent, but there you go. So, I don't think we need to worry about that. And, on the other hand of things, Nagini doesn't seem, in the book, she doesn't seem like she's a slave or a pet. He seems to, I've seen the relationship between Voldemort and Nagini described as being, she's the closest thing he has, you know, to being affectionate to someone, you know, he obviously Voldemort can't love, but it's the closest he's ever had to loving something, which I think is just really interesting. You know, that it's a snake, and you know, this snake, Nagini, is instrumental to his survival. You know, without her, he wouldn't have survived because he wouldn't have had that potion with her venom. And I think, interestingly, this is where I start to theorize a little bit. You know, if you think about it, Nagini turning into a snake, losing the human part of herself, would then be considered, you know, snakes aren't exactly considered beautiful or amazing creatures. You know, a lot of people are scared of snakes. So you can kind of imagine the reaction. You know, she's suddenly a snake forever, and she's in this body of a snake. You know, she's got no more arms, no more legs. You know, she's just got like a snake's body. And you can imagine, you know, especially if, you know, it's been a long time between her permanently becoming a snake and then her meeting Voldemort for the first time, you can kind of imagine the kind of loneliness that would be if you went, you know, decades without speaking to someone, decades of just being on your own, decades of remembering what it was once like to be a human and now being stuck in this body. And so I think this is just me completely theorizing. None of this is canon, but you can kind of imagine that by the time she met Voldemort, who is a Parseltongue, of course, he could kind of communicate with her. You know, he does seem to be able to talk and understand her, which for her would have been the first in a long time. And I saw someone make a comparison between, you know, young Tom Riddle and Credence, who we already know Nagini is going to be close to in the Crimes of Grindelwald. So, you know, you could make that argument that she's seeing some of Credence in Voldemort, almost like that fear, you know, people fearing him and him not, you know, him having this kind of darkness. And you know, even if you believe that's bullshit, you know, it's still the idea that, you know, she's a snake suddenly and you know, she turns into a snake and she can't communicate with people, and then he comes along and is like, can communicate with her. It kind of, you can imagine that would kind of bring out the humanity in her again, and that would make her feel a bit more human, like remember what it's like to be human, which I find like so interesting. Like I can't wait for someone to I can't wait to see if this is true. This is just how I'm envisioning it. Like I said, it's not canon. This is just me kind of speculating. So, you know, I you know, reading the relationship between Nagini and Voldemort, I never saw it as being like she was a servant or a pet. He, you know, he trusted her enough to make her a Horcrux. And, you know, I don't think he would trust any old snake to be a Horcrux, you know. He was very, very particular about the types of vessels he used as his Horcruxes. Like, you know, the Hufflepuff, the Helga Hufflepuff's cup, the Ravenclaw diadem, Slytherin's locket. You know, these are all kind of quite sort of, what's the word? Very fancy, almost like extravagant objects. Like these have some kind of historical meaning because they belong to the founders of Hogwarts. And then, you know, Harry, he obviously didn't know he created Harry as a Horcrux, so Harry doesn't really count, I suppose, but because he didn't choose Harry to be a Horcrux. But then, like, his diary, for example, he used that to preserve the memory of himself as, you know, as he was when he was 16, for, you know, whatever purpose, really. You know, it's been a while since I've, like, properly, like, analysed this, but, like, that diary, you know, it was obviously of some importance, you could say, you know, but the ring was definitely important, I feel, because I'm pretty sure in the Half-Blood Prince it said that it belonged to his father, his grandfather, or something, like someone like in the wizarding part of his family. It belonged to someone there. So, you know, I am personally just the fact that Nagini is also a Horcrux speaks volumes to me. That he would trust her enough to be a Horcrux. You know, it just speaks volumes about the trust he must have for her, that he would put a part of his soul inside her. And I have seen people complain about it being phrased like that, like having a piece of his soul inside her. And, you know, if you're gonna overanalyze it, you're not gonna enjoy it, because it's, you know, it's not real. It is a fantasy series. I wish we didn't have to take this so seriously. I'm literally here just to enjoy it, and to enjoy the drama and the magic and the wonder. I'm not here to be, you know, to tear it to pieces and to criticize it within an inch of its life. You know, it's not real. If you poke at it hard enough, you will find plot holes. But honestly, I personally am really excited to see Nagini, and I'm really excited to see what Claudia Kim does with her, especially after like hearing Claudia Kim sort of talk about Nagini the way she does. Obviously she hasn't said too much, but she has said about the whole humanity thing and wanting to cling on to her humanity. So, you know, I'm already very excited to see Nagini in Crimes of Grindelwald, and I'm excited to see Nagini in presumably the other films as well, to see what kind of role she has to play in the whole Grindelwald thing, as well as how she then might become Voldemort's sort of trusted snake. Another thing I find interesting about the whole Maledictus thing is, as J.K. Rowling said on Twitter, it's passed from mother to daughter. And some people have said, oh, that's sexist, but I think that's kind of the point that she's trying to make. Because I feel like, you know, if it's passed from mother to daughter, that's kind of making a point about, I feel like, you know, mother to daughter, women being trapped in the body of animals, you know, it kind of, to me, that's kind of the point. It's trying to say something about that period in history, you know, that period for women. Because in that period of history, women would not have had the same kind of freedom that they do now. And I'm not saying that they were, like, you know, kind of forced to be slaves or anything, but they were, you know, they were, in that period of history, they would not have been as sort of taken seriously. They would have most likely felt very trapped and confined by society at that point. So I feel like that is kind of the point that J.K. Rowling's trying to make. And, I mean, I've seen someone compare this whole Maledictus thing to, I'm sorry, I'm going to be really gross. I'm sorry if there's any blokes listening out there. But I've seen this whole Maledictus curse be compared to a woman's period. You know, obviously the Maledictus thing is not monthly. It's, you know, it's like a thing where you're going to permanently transform into an animal for the rest of your life. But it kind of, like, the whole thing, it's like passed from mother to daughter, and it's a blood curse. You know, you can kind of compare the two. And, you know, as someone who's a woman, I am fully qualified to speak about what it's like to have a period, and I can honestly say there is nothing worse than having a period. I swear to God. There are times where I wish I was pregnant just so I could get out of having them. That is how bad they can get. Like, you know, it's cramps, it's, you know, oh, I'm not going to go into too explicit a detail, but, you know, you could kind of make that argument, like, women having to go through this blood curse, you know, I just think that's really interesting. I mean, you can kind of derive any meaning from it that you want. I'm kind of digging this meaning, because it's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if anyone's ever seen this, but there is a horror film called Ginger Snaps. It's not really a horror film, but it's this girl, she's like a teenage girl, and she's going through puberty, and at the same time she becomes like a werewolf, and so it kind of compares puberty to becoming a werewolf, and I just find that really funny, but really true. Like, it kind of reminds me of that. It's like, it's painful to go through this. It's, you know, you turn into like a snarling monster every month, which I suppose you could compare to actually being a werewolf, but, you know. So just to quickly wrap this whole podcast up, because I do not want this to go on for much longer. I'm aware I've just rambled again. I just want to say I am really excited to see Crimes of Grindelwald. I'm really excited to see Nagini. And I'm really excited to see Claudia Kim as well. I'm so excited, and I'm going to just be like, the whole time, just like standing her really hard, like, yes! You go, Nagini, you be a boss snake bitch, you know? I mean that in the most sort of empowering feminist way possible, you know? You know, I mean, if she wants to be an empowering sort of snake bitch, she should go and be an empowering snake bitch. And I mean bitch in, like, the nicest way possible. Like, you know, the kind of cool bitch. So before I sign off, it's time for the Beast of the Podcast. And this Beast of the Podcast is the Erumpent. Now, you know, the Erumpent, when I have to describe the Erumpent to people, I just describe the Erumpent as being a big, horny, grey rhinoceros with explosive fluid in its horn. That's literally the best way I can describe it, is this big horny rhinoceros. Like, that is what it is, basically. It's like, I mean, it's a bit bigger than a rhinoceros, of course, but, you know, that is literally the only way I can really describe it to people who aren't fans of the Wizarding World. Just, you know, big, horny rhino. I just really love the Erumpen, especially since, like, she run, like, you know, charging after Jacob. Like, you know, me too. I mean, I absolutely love Jacob. That would probably be me. But I feel like Queenie would maybe have something to say about that if I did that, like if I ran charging after him. So yeah, that is this week's podcast. This one actually seems to be shorter than the last few, which I'm happy about, because I'm trying to cut down the length of time I'm spending on these podcasts. Just because I know it can be a bit boring to hear me talk for about 20 minutes straight. So yeah, thank you guys for joining me. As always, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe. And if you want to follow me on any of my social medias, then the links to all of those are in the bio as usual. Also, if you feel like supporting what I do, because I'm a poor university student, then I have a Ko-fi page that's also in the description. So yeah, and if you guys ever want to chat with me on a live stream, or you want to, you know, just leave a comment with your opinion, please feel free, and I will see you guys in the next episode.